Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, it has been quite a while since I updated the tier list and I finally got around to doing it. Truth be told, I just had a weird mental block on this entire thing, but we are here finally. So needless to say, this is going to be a slightly longer video because there are a lot of new champions, a lot of changes in general to the list as well. But before we go any further, it is important to note that, well, first of all, this list is primarily offensive. If a champion is purely good on defense, then it's not going to be a champion that ranks overly highly on this list at all. As a great example is going to be Korg, is in the lowest category pretty much offensively, but we know that he's one of the best defenders. I do plan on making a generic defensive tier list, or use it as a second tab for this as well, so hopefully I can get work started on that one in near future. But meanwhile, we're going to be taking a look at this. So again, the most important things overall that will affect where champions are on the tier lists will be obviously focus on more important game modes, more active game modes, more dynamic, the ones that people typically tend to rank champions up for. So if a champion, for instance, is just good for Alliance Quest, then, you know, that's not necessarily the most important thing in the game. So overall, the criteria or the reasonings will typically be a mixture of quests and general usability, and then Alliance War, and then Battlegrounds and stuff like that. So also it is important to note that this list is a mixture of my personal view of the game and the current game relevance and trends. Please do not use this list as a point of argument, but more as a food for thought. Each summoner has different needs, preferences, and so on and so forth that far outweigh importance of this or any other list. Please rank champions that will help you achieve where you are trying to go and achieve the game goals that you are trying to achieve, rather than blindly follow this or any other type of list. This is exactly the reason why I do not like to include additional information here to these lists, like whether the champion needs to be awakened, what masteries to run, so on and so forth, because I do encourage and want you guys to do your own kind of research when you're looking into the champion itself and understand it better than you possibly could ever from a basic list with a symbol next to it, because you need to know what, you know, you're ranking up. So, all that being said, I always try to keep the meta and top of the game lists relatively short, and that also means that there are some changes and demotions. For the most case, we can see that there is nothing really changing in the Cosmic or Mutant classes. I do think that Apocalypse still deserves to be at top of the game, because he's still extremely relevant for Alliance War stuff, and obviously, needless to say, for general questing situations, even though Apocalypse's stock overall has definitely fell down since the introduction of Battlegrounds. He's not unusable in Battlegrounds, but he's definitely far from a dominant mutant champion or something like that. And then I do think that Science at the moment is up for debate. I do think that Spot is fast becoming one of the top options in Science. In a future list, I will quite possibly swap out Mr. Fantastic and Spot, but at the moment, Mr. Fantastic still, in my opinion, does deserve to be at the top of the game because of his impact in Alliance War and virtually all other types of content, as well as maintaining his relevance in Battlegrounds based on what type of metas we are running. But I do think that Spot is a definite contender on coming up top here. But it is still very early, so we're going to see how that shakes out. And I do think that this is actually a change that I did want to make, but I just... oh, actually, I did make it. I just didn't... well, you guys can see that. I added Omega Sentinel here lower, but I left her up there. I do think that Omega Sentinel usage has slightly decreased. We do not see her as often in Alliance Wars, in Battlegrounds as well. She's not necessarily a staple anymore. She's still a very, very, very good champion, but I do think that now we have clear top 3 tech with Ghost, Nimrod, and Warlock, and I do think that Omega Sentinel is somewhat slightly further down. There are a few champions that have climbed up here, like Penny Parker, obviously Infamous Iron Man. I have added to the meta as well, because he is becoming more and more popular, and I do think he's solid. I do think that's about as high as he will ever climb in general. But that being said, we do need to take a look at the meta here, and then we're going to go over the new additions and stuff like that. So in the meta, Cosmic class did not really change. We have Null King Groot and Corvus Glaive. Corvus Glaive, if anything, might end up getting pushed down a bit, because we really do not see Corvus that much flopping around. We definitely do see more of Gore, I would say, or Cersei. So that might actually be a change quite soon that I'm going to be making kind of sadly. I do think that Corvus is unfortunately going to go down. Then in Mutant class, there has been a few changes. Number one, I did move down Cable from meta, because using Cable definitely has been much more rare sight in general. He does not see remotely as much game time and attention as he once used to. And that also has largely to do with the fact that synergies and synergy reliant champions are just becoming harder and harder to use in more aspects of game than just the one. Like Eternity of Pain, we couldn't access synergies. Obviously, Battlegrounds, we can't use synergies, so on and so forth. And he's definitely kind of losing his impact. Overall, as a class as a whole, also, I must say that Mutant is probably the class that overall is integrating itself the worst at the moment in Battlegrounds. And next class ranking, when it's going to come up in June, that probably will be reflected, because at the moment I do think that Mutant's kind of falling behind virtually everything. It's been absolutely ages since we got a new, good, great Mutant character, and even any Mutant character, to be honest. I think the last ones were like Toad and Sauron and Captain Britain, relatively early last year, and neither one of them have been, you know, blowing everybody out of the water. I think Toad is the best of the three latest Mutants, but even Toad, you know, has its limits. But I do think that Domino is making a comeback. I do think Domino is becoming more and more visible, with the more new nodes are letting her shine in story content and so on and so forth. And obviously there is the Battlegrounds thing that is also letting her shine more. We're kind of appreciating Domino more, I suppose, without her Trinity, that at this point sometimes it's easy to forget that if you do synergize her up, she can be absolutely busted in other game modes as well. I think Omega Red is kind of re-establishing himself. Bishop is definitely very high now. But let's move on to the Mystic class. There are a few changes here as well. I do think Juggernaut at this point has earned himself a meta status, because he's just an absolute nuke. He's a powerhouse. Whenever he works great. He does things excellent. And even though he's not the heaviest on utility, due to that permanent unstoppable that he gains, you can actually extract quite a bit of utility from that, which are allowing him to get always guaranteed intercepts, guaranteed openings. Like you can use him against Korg with no problems, for instance, because you can just dash back, let Korg dash in at you, and you know, start combos with light very easily. And that is definitely helping him out a lot. I have placed Absorbing Man at the moment in meta, even though he's very new still. I do think that Absorbing Man is slightly overhyped at the moment. I do think he's very, very good champion. Potentially, he might move at the top of the game. And there is a ton of value for Absorbing Man. But it is important to recognize that there are very, very good matchups for Absorbing Man. And then there is like a casual or average matchup, which goes for most champions. But then Absorbing Man in a casual matchup also incorporates a quite high skill requirement for not as much of a reward. Absorbing Man is a champion that goes from super mega OP against Terax and a handful of other champions to all right against a whole bunch of other champions and kind of more casual matchups. But he also at the same time does require relatively high skill requirement and to keep tracks on many things, and things can go wrong. And one of the bigger weaknesses, I suppose, about Absorbing Man is that for all of his utility and all of his counters, he like counters the one thing at a time. And I completely understand that. I get that design philosophy, but it obviously has its weaknesses. You know, it, in my opinion, works perhaps slightly better with Black Widow Clairvoyant, where we have a similar idea of you get one immunity at a time and one effect at a time. And that obviously presents challenges where you might need to switch quickly and you can't because you need to finish the combos and so on and so forth. But with Absorbing Man, it seems kind of even more rough at the times, where you can be shock immune and have physical resistance, but you know, when you need energy resistance and shock immunity, that's something you can't achieve at the same time, so on and so forth. So I do think that Absorbing Man definitely has a ton of upsides. I do think he's still relatively new. I think the better more people get with Absorbing Man, we're going to see how it shakes out. And there is a potential in this champion to climb to the top of the game. But at the same time, there are many more weaknesses that people are noticing about Absorbing Man and starting to exploit. His below average health pool, or his reliance on maintaining the forms and so on and so forth. So we'll see. But I do like the champion a lot. I do have rank 4200 as well. I think Longshot is proving himself more and more as well. Longshot got moved back. Longshot was up here a while back, then I moved him down, and now I moved him back up. Because I do think that Longshot at this point should be pretty much meta rank up. He's great for vast majority of the Battlegrounds nodes. We do see him used here and there in Alliance War. Obviously, if he works for any specific quest or any specific fight, he's often going to be one of the best champions for it. And he's also establishing himself more as a very tricky and problematic defender with his increased ability accuracy, with his ability to gain power in unconventional means or in defense. And that definitely gives a lot of problems. And then we have a Science class. And I think Science class quite reflects what I think is currently one of the best classes in the game, where we do have this whole slew of champions that are just very, very, very good. Like, that is definitely a reflection of my own roster here, where I just want to rank up a ton of Science champions, and if I wasn't trying to keep things balanced in the class itself, I'd probably move Joe Fixit up. I'd want to move Anti-Venom up. I will eventually probably move Cassie Lang and Hulk up and Spineham. And all of these champions are like potential rank 4 candidates. And Science class has just so many extremely versatile, useful, unique champions that are of very, very high quality. More so than virtually any other class at the moment, in my opinion, perhaps with the exception of Mystic, where you can see there's a conglomeration of Mystic champions as well. But we have I-Bomb doing well in virtually all the game modes. We still have Mr. Negative, who's an absolute beast whenever he can be used. Overseer. Void is still maintaining his relevance. Quicksilver, solid. Establishing himself as one of the Nightmare Defenders. We have Titania, Spider-Man 2099. As I said, Spot could very easily climb to the top here. And then definitely Sting's stock price has increased drastically, with him being kind of like a staple Battlegrounds defender, with him being used more and more in Alliance War offensively. I used him in like 3 or 4 wars in the last season, and I think I'm quite sure I used him in the previous season as well, where he might not be the fastest, but his unique set of utilities can come in handy extremely well. And then obviously, as Kabam's making incursions kind of more relevant, and with this side event and in general Zone 25 push is becoming more of a thing, more and more people are looking at the thing and investing materials in him. Here, one change that I forgot to mention and forgot to talk is, I actually demoted Shang-Chi for Valkyrie. I have changed my opinion about Valkyrie from my initial impression. And initially, I definitely preferred Massacre. At this point, I'd say that overall, for game, I'd prefer Valkyrie. I do think that Massacre is better specifically for Battlegrounds attack. But when it comes to versatility in casual questing content and specifically Alliance Wars, then Valkyrie does take it. And obviously, Valkyrie has performed better than I thought for Battlegrounds as well. So I do think that Valkyrie deserves at the moment this spot as, in my opinion, 3rd best skill champion currently, where she just bypasses so many nodes, so many champion abilities, and she does it at a very reasonable level of skill requirement, and most importantly, kind of very reliably. There isn't like any Hail Marys you need to throw, stuff like that. You just need to have calm and collected fights. Her utility against Unstoppable is coming to play more and more often. Her stun immunity can also be extremely useful. And we can see definitely that Valkyrie has become a mainstay at the highest levels of the game, virtually everywhere, be that questing, be that war, be that Battleground. So I do think that's a very good reason to have her up top here. I do think Shang-Chi is still very great. Obviously, he's still very high. Mole Man, I think, is recovering some ground. We're seeing more and more Mole Man being used. Falcon is up here in Massacre. And Crossbones. Crossbones is probably going to be the next skill to earn the promotion, or one of the next. I think Crossbones' overall value is increasing as well. But we're going to get to that in a second. In the tech class, I do think that Omega Sentinel slightly is taking a step back. Infamous Iron Man, I think, is working fine. I think they're great. I think Penny Parker's stock is increasing, more so because of her offensive prowess. Now, there are tons of champions that work for her very well defensively, but Whenever it comes to any damage enhancements and her level 2, she immediately kind of explodes in popularity, which is what we have seen in many of the previous Battlegrounds metas, so on and so forth. And then I still think Hulkbuster Ultron Guardian is holding the ground very well. And then frequently used champions. As a quick reminder, frequently used is also the highest category I will be willing to give any brand new champion, basically. Because meta, by definition, means the most effective tactics available, and that also, by definition, implies that people are using this like widespread at the most competitive levels of the game. And you can't be a meta character if nobody has you. You can't be a meta character if you have not proven yourself already at the highest levels of the game. So for instance here, I do think strongly that Cassie Lang in a few months is going to graduate to meta. I do think she's a very good character, rank 4, very high sig, but I can't put her in meta just because we don't see that yet. We don't see Cassie Lang being spammed in Battlegrounds decks, we don't see her being spammed in Alliance War, tier 1 offense, so on and so forth, and that's because hardly anybody has her. So, you might look at it as a technicality that doesn't necessarily speak of the quality of the champion, but at the same time, this is the way where I feel most comfortable valuing champions, not on their sheer promise or their abilities on paper, but more on their practical applications and of the achievements that they have established themselves as. It's like, I would be willing to make a bet that Cassie Lang is going to become quite popular science champion, but at the same time, that would be a bet. Every champion that is up here right now, that's already a thing that has happened. That is what we can see. These are the champions that we see in top tier Alliance Wars. These are the champions that we see in Battlegrounds, so on and so forth. And Cassie's not one of them, because hardly anybody has her. Yes, you might say it's unfair, but it's just the way I like to characterize these champions. And whenever I put somebody up here, then that's already because they have earned it, they have deserved it. And that's how I view champions in general, where they exist in competition with each other. And if they want to be considered to be the best of the best, they have to have proved it. So that's why Cassie's here. I would have absolutely no qualms pushing her higher. But before I do so, I actually want to see her do those things at the most competitive aspects of the game. That being said, if we break it down, there aren't many changes in Cosmic class at the moment. As I said, Corvus would probably potentially go down. Gore or... Gore, I think, is the more likely current promotion. But I do think that Cosmic class is becoming a bit stagnant as well at the moment. They had this huge influx of, Hulkling and Hyperion and stuff like that. And now they just kind of calmed down with the Cosmics a bit. The things that have changed here as well, Havoc has earned a promotion. I do think that Havoc is becoming more and more relevant again because of Alliance War, because of the Battlegrounds. And on a personal note, Havoc is also one of the best kind of like somewhat accidental rank ups that I did, where only reason I ranked up Havoc to rank 4 was because I got a Mutant rank 3 to 4 gem, and I didn't really have any champion I really wanted to rank up, and I kind of liked Havoc. And then all of a sudden it turned out that he did fantastic for several of the Alliance War fights. For instance, Hazard Shift Absorbing Man or something else. And then he did fantastic in Battlegrounds. And overall, he's been putting in work in a ton of aspects. So Havoc has earned himself a spot up here in frequently useful category. And Emma Frost has been downgraded to useful. Realistically, we do not see much of Emma Frost around the game, at the very least at the highest levels of it. I absolutely love the character, but that's just the reality. She hasn't necessarily been, taking the world by fire. And Mystics, again, Mystic has like a massive group of champions that perform extremely well, depending on the circumstances. They're not necessarily mainstay everywhere all the time, but that is kind of characteristic of Mystic class, where there's just a ton of very high quality champions, similar to Science class. That's why I believe actually my most ranked up classes are Mystic and Science overall, because there's just so many very good champions. Not necessarily absolutely broken, but very good. America Chavez has earned a promotion here to a frequently useful tier, because her buff is actually very good, and she's much more capable than people still think she is, I'd say. Wiccan actually got pushed down from meta because Wiccan has taken a bit of a step back. He's not as present in Alliance War anymore, partially because of the change to the boss node or change to the nodes in general. He's not quite as present in Battlegrounds at the moment either. Spider-Man is kind of coming on up and up. I do think that this guy might be earning promotion eventually to meta tier because we are seeing more and more of him. I think Ebony Maw is doing great things, Mojo is doing great things, but overall I'm quite happy with the way this Mystic bit looks like. And again, as I said, most of these Science Champions, there's a good argument of me wanting to call them meta. I think Joe Fixit is gaining a ton of popularity. People are still sleeping on Anti-Venom offensively. Spider-Ham, She-Hulk, Cassie Lang, new buffed Hulk is being great as well. It's very new, and we are gonna likely see increase in his popularity. He's definitely one of my shortlist future rank 4s, and I quite like what I see. I do like that. I hope next meta in Gladiator Circuit is gonna let him shine, but we'll see how that happens. Skill class, Aegon is taking another dip back, just because, again, of the game trends at the moment. We haven't had any long form content in a really long time. All the new content designed doesn't really let this guy, you know, open up to his best. Only kind of saving grace for Aegon at the moment is the people who don't have Hercules when they do incursions pushes, basically. Because he's still very, very, very good incursion champion, but not as good as Hercules, and typically doesn't see that incursions run unless somebody's missing a Hercules, I'd say. But overall, all of these skill champions and skill class in general, I think, is taking a step up because we got Black Cat, Stealth Suit Spider-Man, Hit Monkey, Crossbones, Black Widow, Deadly Origin. All of these champions are seeing more in terms of popularity and playtime, largely due to Battlegrounds and the way the specific metas are configured. And if you take a look at the first 5 seasons, especially in like last 3 seasons, I think skill class has been one of the more kind of consequential classes where there are just a ton of very effective, fast-paced, versatile champions that are one of the more strong classes in Battlegrounds alongside Mystics for their defenders. I think skill class would likely put an argument for the best attackers overall in most metas, in between Kingpin, Valkyrie, Falcon, Moleman, Massacre, Shang-Chi. Skill class doesn't have too much in terms of defenders. There's Korg, there's Nick Fury. But other than that, they're not necessarily the most defensive, but they're definitely very capable offensive class in Battlegrounds, which I like personally a lot. And then the final ones, tech ones. I actually have demoted a couple of tech champions, like Silver Centurion, for instance. Silver Centurion is just not present anywhere at the moment, so he has to take a step back. A couple of these were demotions as well, like Guillotine 2099 and Nebula used to be at the meta tier. They definitely have taken a step back. We do not see that much of Guillotine 2099 or Nebula. I have placed with Vision here because I still do have quite high hopes for her and future Ant-Man as well. And again, it's similar argument as with Cassie Lang. I do think that either one of them have the potential to climb up to the meta, but they will actually have to put in work to get there. And then to quickly go over the useful tier, there's no major change for Cosmic. I have bumped up Nova to useful because I do feel like he has some uses, specifically with Battlegrounds offense, but that's it. In Cosmic class, Jubilee, I bumped up 1 tier as well, moved her to useful. Even though, if you have been watching this channel, you will know that I'm definitely not a fan of Jubilees. Emma Frost was a demotion, actually. I don't think I made any changes to the Mystic class here. I do not think I made any changes to the Science class yet here. Skill class, a 2-man Mantis, both are at the moment in useful tier. I like Mantis. I do think that the problem with Mantis is that she requires very fast-paced and very skillful playstyle with 0 safety net. And that kind of annoys me slightly with her, because I do think there's definitely a potential, but she just hasn't made any real impact yet. Atuma is up for buff as well, so that's why he's here. I do think he has his uses, but nothing too important yet or at the moment. As I said, Silver Centurion and Rocket Raccoon, I think both are fairly placed. Shuri, I actually ended up demoting to occasionally useful, because let's face it, Shuri sucks for virtually everything aside from potential defender here and there. Hope her tune-up is good. And then there aren't more major changes pretty much anywhere around here. So that's about it. Right, so as well, like obviously this list does not include the champions that are not available as 6 stars. It will be Ultron Classic, Magic, and Quake. Here are their potential placements, should they be available as 6 stars. And yeah, I'll try to get these updated now back to the normal schedule every month, as well as adding a bit extra to it. I do plan on making specific battlegrounds lists, and then also obviously generic defensive list. Yeah, this one was a bit longer. Sorry for that. It's been a while. My apologies for that as well. And let me know what you would change. Obviously, it's all up for debate and discussion. This is just my personal opinion. As I said, I do expect Corvus to go down, Spot to go up, probably. We'll see what happens to Absorbing Man. And yeah, there are, more potential changes coming, because this is just like me getting back to it. And I already had to change a ton on this list. Either way, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about